Robert Bear is the vice president of Spiritual Awakenings International. He has had two near-death experiences, and he worked for over 2 decades in California in the Highway Patrol, right? So who is Robert Bear?
Actually, I'm going to say that there probably have been two Robert Bears. There was the one before March 22nd, 2009, when I died from a massive heart attack in Phoenix, Arizona, and had a near-death experience and was revived. And that Robert Bear from that time until this time is a totally different person. I had a set of circumstances that in retrospect, I probably should have paid more attention to. Back in 2008, towards the end of 2008, I had a friend of mine that we had been policemen together in California, and he called me from out of the blue. And AJ, like any good friend, when you you have a good friend, when you pick up the phone, talk to somebody, and maybe it's been months or years since you last talked to him, but the dialogue just continues to go. You're so close to one another. And he called me, and from out of the blue, he asked me, he said, "Robert, I feel compelled to ask you something." He goes, "Are you right with the Lord?" And it kind of shocked me. And I said, "Well, I think I am." And then we kind of didn't talk much more about it. But shortly after that time period, I was in bed one night, and all of a sudden I woke up, and there was my mother at the foot of my bed. She had died in 2005, and she looked beautiful. She looked like she did when I was a little boy. She was all in white. And I looked at her, and I can't tell you how we communicated. It might have been telepathically, but she told me that I was going to die and to get my affairs in order. And I was so upset at myself because I didn't think fast enough to tell her how much I loved her and missed her. And she just disappeared. And I knew it wasn't a dream. And it just, I couldn't sleep. I was in a pool of sweat. I even called my father, who was still alive at the time, and told him about it. And so it was so real to me. Finally, I kind of let that go, and I was having a full physical exam from a doctor where you had a treadmill and all your tests and everything, and I went ahead and passed that with flying colors. So I think in the back of my mind, I just kind of put it to bed. But then an unusual thing happened. My friend that had called me and asked me if I was right with the Lord, he died. And it was really sad. I mean, him and I we'd been friends since the 1960s. And I went down to California and took part in his eulogy and his celebration of life. And I never mentioned the last conversation we had. I just he had asked me if I was right with the Lord, and I just kind of just put it in the back of my mind and didn't think about it anymore. But then a few months later, I woke up in the middle of the night, and there he was at the foot of my bed.
Wow.
Young, like when we were young. And I looked at him, And he said, I'm going to bring you through the light. I'll be with you. And I said, what are you talking about? We were talking, it was like telepathically. And he says, I have to go now. I want to go visit my children in Sacramento. So here again, I couldn't sleep. Pool of sweat. AJ, it was real. It was not a dream. It was a real vision. And I made a couple phone calls because I wasn't aware of where his grandchildren were. Well, lo and behold, it was confirmed they were in Sacramento. So this happened just a little bit before I went to Phoenix, Arizona. I went to Phoenix, Arizona in March of 2009. And my son lives down there. He was a high school teacher, football, baseball, basketball type coach. And he had a spring break every year. And I would go down there and I would visit him and my granddaughters and go to a bunch of spring training baseball games where the big leagues have their spring training. We would do that every year. And I went down there, and I'm from a coastal climate in Oregon where it's probably around 60 to 70 degrees is a real hot day there. But I was down in Arizona and it was almost 100 degrees, even though it was March. And I didn't feel comfortable. And I kind of just chalked it off to the adapting to the climate. And I felt sick to my stomach all the time and just didn't feel good, was lightheaded. Totally, in the back of my mind, I just had a full physical. I passed it with flying colors. I thought, well, maybe I might be coming down with something, or maybe a virus or a little bug of some sort. So it came time to catch a flight to go back home to Oregon. And I was at the airport. I said goodbye to my son, and I looked at the TSA line. Oh, it was so long, and I thought, how am I going to make it through this? I wasn't feeling good, but I went ahead and I made it through there. And then I bought in a little convenience store there on the airport. I bought some aspirin and took them. Probably a good thing I did. And I went, and it came time to board the plane. I got on the plane, AJ, and I started to put my bags into the overhead compartment. And I dropped dead of a massive heart attack. It just all at once. And I was very fortunate. On that plane were a couple of firemen from the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, that were on that plane, and they were trained in CPR and how to use a defibrillator. And there was also a doctor on board, and the flight had not taken off yet. So I don't remember any of that because I gravitated into a light, and it was one of the most wonderful experiences I've ever had. And somebody was with me. I don't know who. I can't tell you who it was, but I'd like to think it was my friend because that I talked to you about, because he was that type of a person, and we were very close. It's kind of like a brotherhood, being in the police, the old police guys. We were all friendly with one another. It's just like family. So I gravitated up, and I saw colors that don't exist in this realm. It was absolutely phenomenal. And I felt warm, and it was like full love. But then I ended up in the presence of a higher power that I could not look at. It was the most humbling experience anybody could ever have. I could not look. I was talked to, and I don't know how it was or what language, but I was asked telepathically, I believe, what good had I done in my life? And the next thing I know, it was a life review. And it started from the day I was conceived until the day that I died.
Wow.
And by the way, when I meant conceived, I was telling my father this part of my life review. And he said, well, what do you mean when it was when you were conceived? And I said, I saw you and mom in front of an old Chevrolet. I said, I remember seeing the Chevrolet, and I saw it. It was like black. And you and mom were young, and you were there, and she was happy. And he goes, well, what did she have on? And I said, she had on like a plaid skirt and a sweater. And he says, wait a minute. So he went up and went through a box of old pictures that he had, and he showed me this picture. And he said, have you ever seen this picture before? And I said, I've never seen it before. He said, is this what you saw? And I said, yeah. I said, that's the Chevrolet right there. He goes, I said, what's the significance? And he goes, that was one of the best days of your mother's life. That day, we found out she was pregnant with you. We had just outside the doctor's office. And then he said, and then we went down and got married. And I said, you mean I was a love child? And he goes, yes, but he said, your mother would kill me if because they always said they got married a year before they did. And I said, well, that's fine with me. And he said, she'd be so upset at me if you knew. I said, that's okay. But I was convinced, AJ, that life begins at conception, right there. I saw myself in my mother's womb, right there outside the doctor's office. And my life continued all the way. And the life review process was one that it's very difficult to go through, because not only do you feel your feelings, at least this is what happened to me, you feel your feelings, but also the feelings of the people you interact with. And I'm telling you, it is really humbling and hard to know what people think about you. And especially when you have a lot of power like I did. Not only was I a policeman, I was a city manager, I was or community manager, a professor, a tribal administrator, general manager. I always supervised people, and in that aspect, you were always dealing with personnel and problems and things of that nature. And of course, as a policeman, arresting people or being involved in situations that are very uncomfortable. And when you find out what people think of you, it's a reckoning. It was a reckoning for me. That's why I said my life was different from my birth until March 22nd, 2009. And from 2009 forward, it's a total different breed of cat, and I'll explain that further. But I saw my life unfold, and a lot of life lessons that probably your audience would like to hear about, because this may be applicable to them. I'll just give an example or two. I was like 4 or 5 years old, and my family used to go shopping on Saturdays. We'd all load up in a station wagon there. All the kids would be running all over the place in the car. That was before seatbelts. And we'd go down to the store, and I had already figured out the dynamics of my family. I grew up in a Catholic household, so my mom kind of ruled the roost in a way. And I knew if I asked my dad for something, I'd be more apt to get something than if I asked my mother. That's just the way it was. And so there was a little pack of baseball cards that I wanted. And I asked my father, can I have those baseball cards? And my mother was in earshot. And my dad, I saw him look at my mother, and he goes, ask your mother. So I asked my mother, and of course she said no. So AJ, I stole the cards. We got home, and I was in my bedroom, and I just opened up the cards, and there was a little piece of stick gum that was with it. I just popped it in my mouth, and my mother opened the door, and she goes, "Robert, where'd you get that?" And then I lied on top of that. So my mother just had a meltdown, and she said, she got my father, and she says, "We're taking him back to the store. This is unacceptable in our family. It's not going to happen." So they loaded me up in the car. I had to go back to the store, and they made me apologize to the store owner. And my mother, I still remember her saying, "Arrest him if you want to. This is unacceptable in our family." And I could read the guy's mind in my life review. It's like, he's 5 years old. Just give me the nickel. I could just see the dynamics. And finally, my dad just gave him a nickel, and everything was okay, except I got grounded for a long period of time when I got home. And I was telling my father about this. And after I had come back to life, and tell him about my life review, and my dad was kind of chuckling, and I said, "Dad," I said, "you guys did your job as parents. What you did had a profound effect on my life. You disciplined me at the right time." All I remember was I was in front of a higher power, and it was like filled with souls. And I don't know if they're actually souls. They were individuals that would speak up whenever my interaction with them happened in my life review. They would tell me nothing but truth, AJ, all truth. I don't want to call it an audience, but I guess technically it was an audience, because it was like packed. And there were like souls were able to talk to you at the same time. It was incredible. I kept watching things unfold, and one thing after another. And I was very, very good at sports when I was younger. Baseball, football, basketball. And I was nasty as a pitcher. I would go right at somebody. And if I hit them, I did not care. But I had friends. I had one friend that was a hemophiliac. He was someone that if he got cut, he would bleed, and his blood didn't clot. So he'd always have to go to the hospital. He was my neighbor, and I would go over and I'd play board games with him, like Monopoly. And when I was watching that part of my life review, I heard someone say, "You are my best friend." And his mother would make us like Kool-Aid, and she always had a pack of cherry Kool-Aid for me, and she would put sugar in it. And when I was watching my life review, I could taste that Kool-Aid and the sugar, and it was just ice cold, and it was phenomenal. And my dad was telling my father about this. My dad told me, he said, "I forgot to tell you this. Paul's father came by in either the late 80s or the 90s to tell us that Paul had been in Los Angeles and had a bleeding episode, and they gave him a transfusion of blood, and it was tainted with AIDS, and he died of AIDS from it." And my father goes, "I think that was Paul that had mentioned that during the life review." And I said, "I think it was too." As a teenager, I was like all the other ones in the United States. We had an affection with cars, muscle cars at the time. And I had a situation where I had a sister that was 10, almost 11 months younger than me. My dad used to call her my Catholic twin, because, you know, we were both born close to one another, even though we were different pregnancies from my mother. But they were pretty strict with my sisters, and if they wanted to go out, I had to double date with them, and I'd have to be in the back seat, they'd have to be in the front seat, like if we went to a drive-in movie. That's just the way it was with my parents. And I always took this one lady, young lady, that I knew she'd always say yes to going with me. But one day she came over to my home, and I was working on my car, and she goes, there's a dance at the Coconut Grove tonight. And this was in Santa Cruz, California. And she goes, can you take me to the dance? And I said, I had other plans. And she goes, well, what's your other plans? And I said, I was going to go cruising with my friends. We used to like to go cruising Beach Street and then go drag race up north of town. And we were like hooligans. And by the way, we all turned out to be policemen. But so she got upset, took off, and then she came back. She had written a letter, and she kind of threw this letter at me. And I picked it up. And when I got to that part of my life review, I heard a voice say, you never opened my letter. That was her. I had never opened it. I still have that letter. It's somewhere in storage. I never opened it. And it must have really, even in the afterlife, things bother people, souls. There's no doubt about it. That really, she brought it up. As a policeman, I worked for Santa Cruz Police Department first, was there a year, then I went to the California Highway Patrol. It paid quite a bit more money. And they sent me to Los Angeles, to the South Central Los Angeles office, which is encompasses the Watts area, which is where they had a huge riot. And it was like a war zone. You heard gunfire all night. And one night I was with another officer, and we were arresting somebody just for a DUI, driving under the influence, and heard some gunshots go off. And we had pulled into the back of an apartment complex. And AJ, it wasn't unusual to be in that type of an area, look up, and there'd be rifles pointing at you. It was really intimidating. And we heard some gunshots going off, and my partner goes, did you hear those? And I said, yeah, those are really, they sound really close. And the next thing I know, I see this guy running towards us with a rifle. And I yelled at him to halt. He didn't halt. He just kept coming right at me. I probably could have been justified to draw down on him, but for some reason or other, I didn't. He came up, and he had told us that somebody had just robbed him, and he was firing some warning shots. And when I saw that part of my life review, I actually heard a voice say, thank you for not shooting me. That had to be this guy. I would keep seeing these things happen over and over and over again. And something, AJ, was fidgeting off to my right. I couldn't look at the higher power, but I did kind of sneak a peek over at the right to see what was fidgeting there. And my dog Scooter, that passed away in 2001, we were extremely close. We did everything together. I took her to work with me sometimes, and it's just, that was her. I saw her. And I was so happy to see her. I did not know that's where animals went too. They were there. She was there. She couldn't come to me, but I saw her, and she was just itching to get to me. She couldn't come to me, but I knew she was there, and she knew I was there. I saw all these things happen, and I could talk for hours on this. I'm not going to do that. But that's one life experience. That's one near-death experience I had. I actually had two the same day. I was revived after being deceased for about 45 minutes. And AJ, the time that I died in 2009 was about the same time period that Michael Jackson, the rock star, died. I don't know if you remember Michael Jackson. And when he passed away, they took him to a doctor in Los Angeles that was renowned for raising the dead. He was deceased for 45 minutes also. I don't know why, but I had a doctor from Pakistan that wouldn't let me die. And he revived me once, and then I passed away again for about 10 minutes, and he kept working on me. Because of that man, I've had 4,941 extra days of life. What a blessing that is. I bet Michael Jackson would have given anything he had to have had that blessing. I really do. And talking about the second time, the second experience, I was revived in the emergency room. And then I passed away again, and I left my body and I hovered over the bed. I was watching them work on me. This was a total different life, total different NDE, near-death experience. They were working on me. I saw the flat line, but in another part of the hospital, not even close, another part of the hospital, my belongings had come in on the ambulance, and there were a couple of people in the admissions office going through my stuff, trying to figure out who the hell I was. So instead of watching them work on me in the hospital, that part, I was watching them go through my stuff. And I was they were looking for my insurance cards, and I was trying to tell them where they were. And then I realized they can't hear me. I must be dead. A lot of policemen carry, or policewomen, men or women, carry two wallets. One has your regular things in it, and the other has your police ID in it, like your badge and your police identification. I had put my insurance cards in the police wallet, and I was trying to tell them that. Finally, they went through the stuff and they found it. And they go, whoa, this guy's a retired police. And I heard the things they were saying. Well, I was revived. And by the way, if your audience hears a near-death experience where somebody says they had a life review, and then another one says they were hovered over their body, I had two of those, two things at the same day. So there's not just one type. And I just wanted to say that. But I was in intensive care, and I had all these machines hooked up to me, and it was horrible. And I told the doctor came in one day, and I was telling him about what I saw in the admissions office when I saw them going through my things and my identification, looking for my insurance cards. He goes, are you kidding me? And I said, no, I saw that. So he went and got those people, brought them back to my bed, and he goes, you tell them what you just told me. So I told them, and they confirmed it word for word. That actually happened. I was in that hospital a lot longer than I wanted to be. I just wanted to go home, AJ. And I told the doctor, I want to go to Oregon. And he says, you need one more surgery. And I said, I want to go to Oregon. I want to go home. I'd seen my daughter and I'd seen my son. That was the most important thing to me. I just wanted to go home. And so he says, well, we'll send you back to Oregon, but you have to immediately go in and have that surgery done. I said, I promise I'll do it. So they put me on a plane, and I was wondering if I was going to make it to Oregon. I made it. Got off the plane, and I ended up eventually in a hospital in Oregon. And it was situation where they were rushing me right in to have the surgery. He had arranged to have somebody that he knew actually do the operation. So I had it. And I was in a recovery room, and it was storming terrible outside. I could hear the rain hit the windows and the wind blowing. And I was kind of woozy, and I looked over to my left and I saw this old nun there. And I thought, what? Am I dead? And I said it out loud. I said, am I dead? And all of a sudden I saw her interact, and she goes, no, you're not dead. And she was kind of chuckling, and I said, what are you doing here? And she goes, I'm praying for you. And I said, well, thank you very much. And she goes, you're welcome. And she just stayed there. And I kept looking at her. And I finally had some conversation with her. She goes, I heard you were deceased for a long time. And I said, who'd you hear that from? And she goes, it's all over the hospital. You're like Lazarus. And I said, well, I was told that. And she goes, do you remember anything that happened? And I said, I do. And I don't know if it's because there was oxygen going in me all the time because of the CPR or the defibrillator. I don't know. But I had my memory. I had everything. I mean, and she goes, can you tell me about it? She says, I've spent my whole adult life being a nun. Actually, she said she was a sister. So I said, well, not now. Let me get a little bit better. She goes, I'll come back later. So she came back. And one of the reasons I'm telling you this, I'm writing a book now about what happened, my near-death experience. And I'm going to start the book with me talking to the nun and laying out everything that happened to me. Because she's one of two persons that I told everything to. And she needed to hear it, AJ. And bless her heart, I recovered and came back to life. I made it through the surgeries, and I'm still in a situation where I have to have all different types of medical things done periodically. And a couple things happened that are unusual. Deborah Diamond wrote a book. It's entitled Dealing with Death After Near Death. And I was one of her, I think, 4 topic persons that she focused on. And like I set microwaves off. I have a situation where, like, if I go to TSA, I set the the detector's off. There's a couple stores, if I leave the store, the detectors go off. And I had a very nice thing happen where my vision, and they don't know why it happened, but I'd been like 20/90 or something like that before I had my near-death experience. Now it's 20/10, and it's held consistent. I just had it checked less than a month ago again. It's still 20/10. My vision got better. They don't know why. Unbelievable. So a lot of these things are happening, and I've just been really blessed. Every day I live it like it's my last day. I don't sleep much. I enjoy every day of life. I get up every morning. No matter what it is, I've learned to realize that most stuff is small stuff. You get a ticket by the police, or you having a bad hair day. That's small stuff. That's not worth agonizing over. You have a situation happens where you got cancer or something like that. That's a different story. But in reality, most stuff is small stuff. And you shouldn't sweat the small stuff. It takes away from your enjoyment of life. And that's part of what my message is. You need to enjoy your life. It's like an adventure, and you have to enjoy the ride, whatever it is. And we're all not created equal in a way that we have equal funds, or we have equal health, or whatever. We all have our own things to deal with, and you just have to learn to accept that. Just like me, I got to be careful with doing. I can't do the things I used to do before, so I've had to adapt to it. But I've tried to make amends with those that I can, if I've done something that I saw in my life review that I didn't think was good or honorable. Not that there was that much, but it was enough to make me feel that I needed to apologize, or I needed to try and rectify. We're all going to die. That's the one thing you can be sure of in life, is that you're gonna die someday. Make the most of your life. You got to make yourself happy with that life, because you will be held accountable. And I can attest to that.
This has been the A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.